Your life looks the way it does because of the decisions you've made, and that's not an insult. That's power. No one is coming to save you. No perfect moment is coming. If something in your life is broken, don't complain about it. Fix yourself. Most people want change without responsibility. They want a different outcome, a different feeling, a different future, but they don't want ownership. And ownership is the starting line of every real transformation, not motivation, not inspiration, ownership. Radical, total, no excuses ownership. Because the moment you decide that everything in your life, everything exists because of choices you made or choices you avoided, you take your power back. See, blaming feels good in the short term. It protects the ego. It gives you a story that says it's not my fault. But every time you tell that story, you hand your power away. You give it to your past. You give it to other people. You give it to circumstances you can't control. And here's the brutal truth. If it's not your fault, you can't fix it. But if it's your responsibility, then suddenly you can change it. Responsibility doesn't mean you caused everything that happened to you. It means you are responsible for what happens next. There's a big difference. You may not have chosen your starting point, but you are choosing your direction every single day. And most people never make that distinction. They stay stuck fighting yesterday instead of building tomorrow. Radical ownership means you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what am I going to do about it? It means you look at your habits, your patterns, your reactions, your standards, and you stop lying to yourself. Because growth begins the moment honesty enters the room. Look at your life right now. Not the version you explain to people, the real one, the one you live when no one's watching. Your energy, your finances, your health, your relationships, your mindset, those are not accidents. They are results. They are feedback. And feedback is a gift if you're strong enough to receive it. When something isn't working, most people get emotional. They get defensive. They get bitter. Powerful people get curious. They say, what is this trying to teach me? Because life is always responding to who you are being, not who you wish you were. Radical ownership means you stop outsourcing your self-worth. You stop waiting for validation, permission, approval, or rescue. You realize that no one is coming to live your life for you. And that's not scary. That's liberating. Because when no one is coming, you become the solution. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out. But you do need to decide that from this moment forward, you are done being a victim of your own story. You are done using your past as a prison. You are done letting old pain justify new limitations. Ownership changes the questions you ask yourself. Instead of, why am I like this? You ask, how can I improve this? Instead of, why does this always happen to me? You ask, what pattern am I repeating? Those questions shift your focus from helplessness to leverage. And here's where it gets real. Ownership is uncomfortable. Because when you take responsibility, you lose the right to complain. Complaining feels productive, but it's emotional procrastination. It keeps you busy without moving you forward. Ownership demands action, and action exposes fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of realizing that you're capable of more than you've been giving. But let me tell you something, the pain of discipline is nothing compared to the pain of regret. Regret is what happens when you knew better and did nothing. Ownership is what happens when you decide that today matters. Every breakthrough you admire in someone else's life started with a moment of radical honesty, a moment where they said, this is on me, not because they were weak, but because they were ready to be strong. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. And standards begin with what you take responsibility for. If you take responsibility for your mindset, you change how you interpret events. If you take responsibility for your habits, you change your daily behavior. If you take responsibility for your emotions, you change how you respond under pressure. And here's the shift most people miss. Ownership isn't about control. It's about influence. You may not control everything that happens, but you control how you show up. You control what you focus on. You control what you practice daily. And what you practice, you become. The strongest people in the world are not the ones with the easiest lives. They are the ones who stopped making excuses and started making decisions. They don't waste energy blaming the weather. They build shelter. They don't curse the darkness. They become the light. When you fully own your life, you stop negotiating with your weaknesses. You stop saying, this is just how I am. That sentence has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. You are not fixed. You are conditioned. And conditioning can be changed. Ownership turns pain into progress, mistakes into lessons, fear into fuel. It forces you to step into leadership, first of yourself, then of your life. And leadership always begins internally. So take a breath and feel this moment. This isn't about guilt. This is about possibility, because the same truth that makes you uncomfortable is the truth that can set you free. If you built this version of your life, you can rebuild it differently. No more excuses. No more waiting. From this moment on, own it. Blame is one of the most expensive habits a human being can have, and most people don't even realize how much it's costing them. Every time you blame someone else, something outside you, something in your past, you feel a tiny sense of relief. And that relief is addictive. It soothes the ego. It says you're not wrong, you're not weak, it's not on you. But that relief comes with a hidden price, because the moment you blame, you give away your ability to build anything better. Blame keeps you busy but powerless. It feels like movement, but it's actually a standstill. You can spend years explaining why things didn't work, why people failed you, why circumstances weren't fair, and none of that explanation will ever create a new result. Explanation doesn't build a future. Action does. And blame is the enemy of action. Here's what most people don't understand. Blame doesn't just point outward, it trains the mind. When you repeatedly tell yourself that someone else is the reason you're stuck, your brain stops looking for solutions. It stops asking creative questions. It stops hunting for leverage. Why would it? You've already decided the problem lives somewhere you can't control, and when control disappears, so does hope. Building begins the moment you shift from who's at fault to what can I do now. That shift looks small, but it changes everything. Because when you ask what you can do, you activate your resourcefulness, you activate focus, you activate energy, you go from reacting to leading. Let's be clear, building doesn't mean pretending life is fair. It doesn't mean ignoring pain or injustice, CE or disappointment. It means refusing to let those things define the limits of your future. It means you stop rehearsing what went wrong and start rehearsing what you're willing to do differently. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack follow-through, and follow-through disappears when blame enters the room. Blame says, why bother? Building says, let's find a way. Think about this. Every structure that stands strong today was once a pile of raw material. No shape, no order, no certainty. Someone had to take responsibility for assembling it piece by piece. Your life is no different. If it feels messy, unfinished, unstable, that's not a verdict. That's a construction site. And construction is noisy, it's uncomfortable, it's imperfect, but it's honest work. Blame keeps you looking backward. Building forces you forward. Blame asks, why did this happen? Building asks, what's the next brick? And the next brick is always something small, something within reach, something you can do today. You don't build confidence by thinking positive thoughts. You build confidence by keeping commitments. You don't build momentum by wishing harder. You build momentum by stacking actions. And blame destroys both because it teaches you to wait instead of work. Here's another truth most people avoid. Blame makes you predictable. When someone blames, they respond the same way every time. Frustration, withdrawal, anger, resignation. Builders respond differently. They adapt, they adjust, they stay flexible because their identity isn't tied to being right. It's tied to getting results, and results don't care about your reasons. They only respond to why, our actions. When you stop blaming, you also stop needing to be understood. You stop needing sympathy. You stop needing validation. You become focused on progress, and progress doesn't require an audience. Building requires humility. The humility to say, I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. The humility to learn, to ask better questions, to change strategies without changing the goal. Blame, on the other hand, is rigid. It locks you into a single story where growth becomes impossible. Every time something goes wrong, you have a choice. You can either protect your ego or expand your capacity. You can either defend your past or design your future. Builders choose growth, even when it costs them comfort. This is where discipline enters, because building isn't glamorous. It's repetition. It's doing the boring thing when no one is watching. It's choosing long-term progress over short-term relief. And blame offers relief. Building offers results. If you want to know why some people keep rising while others stay stuck, look at what they do when things don't work. One group looks for someone to point at. The other looks for something to improve. Same setback, different destiny. Building also changes how you talk to yourself. Instead of, I can't believe this happened, you say, what does this require of me now? Instead of, this always happens, you say, this is feedback. Feedback doesn't insult you, it instructs you. And those who listen get stronger. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not doomed. You are simply being invited to stop blaming and start building. To trade explanation for execution. To trade frustration for focus. Because when you build, even slowly, you regain momentum. And momentum changes how you feel about yourself. It restores belief. It reminds you that you are capable of influence, that your actions matter, that effort compounds. Blame shrinks your world. Building expands it. So the next time you feel the urge to point outward, pause. Take that energy and turn it inward, not as criticism, but as construction. Ask yourself one powerful question. What's one thing I can build today? And then build it. Most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they accept too low. They live at the level of what they tolerate, not the level of what they dream about. And that's the silent force shaping your future right now. Your standards, not your goals, not your intentions. Your standards. A goal is something you want. A standard is something you live by. A goal is what you chase when you're motivated. A standard is what you uphold even when you're tired, frustrated, or bored. And life always responds to your standards, not your wishes. Look at what you allow in your life. Look at the excuses you make. Look at the behaviors you justify. That's not random. That's your standard in action. Whatever you consistently tolerate becomes normal, and whatever becomes normal eventually becomes your identity. If you tolerate being late, you become unreliable. If you tolerate negative self-talk, you become insecure. If you tolerate draining relationships, you become exhausted. If you tolerate average effort, you get average results. Raising your standards isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest. It's about deciding that certain behaviors are no longer acceptable, not because you hate yourself, but because you respect yourself. Most people confuse standards with pressure. They think raising standards means more stress, more force, more intensity. But real standards actually create peace, because when your standards are clear, decisions become easy. You don't negotiate with what you already decided. High standards remove inner conflict. When you know what you stand for, you stop arguing with yourself. You stop asking, should I? And start saying, this is who I am. Identity-driven behavior is powerful because it doesn't depend on mood. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your standards. That's why motivation fades, but identity endures. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your current standards produced your current life. That doesn't mean your life is bad. It means it's a reflection. And reflection isn't condemnation. It's clarity. People say they want confidence, but they tolerate self-betrayal. They say they want success, but they tolerate distraction. They say they want peace, but they tolerate chaos. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Change begins the moment you decide what is no longer allowed, not someday, not when you feel ready. Now, raising your standards starts with small, decisive lines in the sand. You decide, I don't speak to myself that way anymore. I don't stay in environments that drain me. I don't avoid hard conversations. I don't quit on myself. At first, it feels uncomfortable because you're breaking a contract you've had with your old self, and the old self will protest. It will remind you of how things used to be. It will tempt you with comfort. But comfort is the most expensive addiction there is. Standards demand consistency. And consistency builds self-trust. When you keep showing up at the level you decided, something powerful happens. You start believing in yourself, not because of hype, but because of evidence. Self-belief isn't a feeling, it's a result. It's the byproduct of aligned behavior repeated over time. And here's the shift most people miss. Raising your standards doesn't mean doing more. It means accepting less of what weakens you, less distraction, less negativity, less excuse-making, less tolerance for your own patterns that keep you small. Your environment either reinforces your standards or erodes them. The people you spend time with, the media you consume, the conversations you engage in, they all vote on who you become. And if you don't choose intentionally, you choose by default. High standards also require courage, because when you raise them, some things and some people can't come with you. Not because they're bad, but because they're aligned with a version of you that no longer exists. Growth always demands separation before it delivers elevation. This is where many people pull back. They lower their standards to keep peace, but the peace they keep costs them their potential. And nothing drains the soul faster than living below what you know you're capable of. You don't need permission to raise your standards. You don't need approval. You don't need consensus. Standards are personal. They're internal agreements you make with yourself about how you will live. And once you raise them, life will test them, not to punish you, but to confirm them. Challenges show up to ask, do you really mean this? And every time you hold the line, your identity strengthens. High standards create momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates courage, and courage changes your future. So don't ask what you want. Ask what you're willing to no longer tolerate, because the moment you change that answer, everything else begins to change. Raise the standard, and your life will rise to meet it. Most people spend their lives running from pain, and then they wonder why they never grow. They treat discomfort like a warning sign instead of what it really is, a signal. Pain isn't here to destroy you. Pain is here to direct you. It's life's way of saying something needs to change. And the moment you stop fighting that message, pain becomes one of the most powerful allies you'll ever have. Think about it. Pain is the reason you pull your hand away from fire. Pain is the reason you go to the doctor before something gets worse. Pain is feedback. But emotional and mental pain, that's where people get confused. They label it as weakness. They hide from it. They numb it. And by doing that, they miss the lesson completely. Every breakthrough you've ever had came after discomfort. Every level up required you to feel something you didn't want to feel. Fear, doubt, uncertainty, pressure. Growth has never been comfortable. Comfort is where patterns repeat. Discomfort is where identity evolves. The problem isn't pain. The problem is how you interpret it. When pain shows up, most people ask, what's wrong with me? Powerful people ask, what is this trying to teach me? One question leads to shame, the other leads to strength. Pain shows you where you're out of alignment. It highlights habits that no longer serve you. It exposes beliefs that limit you. It reveals standards that are too low. Pain doesn't lie. It points directly at the gap between the life you're living and the life you're capable of. And let's be honest, if growth didn't hurt, everyone would be evolving. If change felt good immediately, no one would stay stuck. The reason pain feels intense is because it's pushing against an old identity, and the ego hates change. It wants familiarity, even if familiarity is suffering. Most people choose familiar pain over unfamiliar growth. They stay in situations they complain about because at least they know how it feels. They call it comfort, but it's actually fear dressed up as stability. Pain is the doorway. On one side is who you've been. On the other side is who you could become. And the only way through is straight ahead. You don't grow by waiting for pain to disappear. You grow by moving while it's still there. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is action in the presence of it. Strength isn't feeling confident. Strength is showing up when you don't. Pain refines you if you let it. It sharpens focus. It strips away excuses. It forces you to confront the truth. And truth is uncomfortable before it's liberating. Think about the moments in your life that changed you the most. They weren't easy. They were moments that stretched you. Moments that broke an old version of you so a stronger one could take its place. Pain didn't ruin those moments. Pain forged them. When you resist pain, it persists. When you listen to it, it transforms. The lesson repeats until it's learned. That's not punishment, that's persistence from life itself. Pain demands essence. You can't numb your way to growth. You have to feel to heal. You have to face what you've been avoiding, and facing it doesn't mean drowning in it, it means using it. Pain asks better questions. It asks what matters now. It cuts through distraction. It removes the trivial. Suddenly, clarity shows up. Suddenly, excuses sound hollow. Suddenly, you realize how much time you wasted negotiating with comfort. Pain also humbles you. It reminds you that growth is earned, that progress requires effort, that strength is built, not given, and humility is not weakness, it's openness to learning. Here's what changes everything. Pain only becomes suffering when it has no meaning. Give it meaning, and it becomes fuel. Channel it, and it becomes focus. Respect it, and it becomes growth. Every time you step into discomfort voluntarily, you expand your capacity. You teach yourself that you can handle more than you thought. And that realization changes how you see yourself. Confidence is born there, not from success, but from survival and expansion. You don't need to seek pain. Life will provide enough of it. What you need is the willingness to use it, to ask, how can this make me stronger? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Pain is temporary. Regret is permanent. Avoiding pain now only guarantees deeper pain later. Growth pain today saves suffering tomorrow. So the next time discomfort shows up, don't retreat, don't numb, don't distract. Lean in, listen, learn, let it shape you. Because pain isn't the enemy. Running from it is. Every action you take begins with a story you tell yourself, not a story you say out loud, but the quiet narrative running in the background of your mind. The story about who you are, what you deserve, what you're capable of, and what's possible for you. And most people never question that story. They live inside it. They defend it. They suffer inside it without realizing they have the power to rewrite it. Your identity is not who you truly are. It's who you've practiced being. It's a collection of memories, emotional experiences, repeated thoughts, and reinforced beliefs. And whatever identity you adopt will shape your behavior automatically. You don't wake up and decide to act like you. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. That's why people can know exactly what to do and still not do it. It's not a lack of information. It's a conflict of identity. When your behavior doesn't match your identity, identity wins every time. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will unconsciously find ways to struggle. If you see yourself as someone who's unlucky, you'll interpret every setback as proof. If you see yourself as someone who's just not disciplined, you'll quit the moment it gets hard. And here's the truth that changes everything, that identity is learned, and anything learned can be unlearned. Your past is not your identity. It's your training. Your failures didn't define you. They conditioned you, and conditioning can be replaced. But first, you have to stop telling the old story like it's the truth. Most people tell stories that keep them safe, not stories that set them free. Stories like, this is just how I am, or I've always been this way, or people like me don't succeed. Those stories feel familiar. Familiar feels safe. But safe doesn't grow you. Change requires a new narrative. A narrative that isn't based on who you've been, but on who you're choosing to become. And at first that story feels uncomfortable because it contradicts your evidence. It contradicts your past. But every new identity begins as a decision before it becomes a belief. You don't wait to believe before you act. You act and belief follows. That's how identity is built. Through repetition, through proof, through experience. If you want to change your life, you don't start by changing your circumstances. You start by changing your story, because your story determines your focus determines your actions, and your actions determine your results. Listen to how you describe yourself. The language you use is a window into your identity. I can't. I'm bad at this. I'm not that kind of person. Those aren't facts. They're scripts, and you repeat them so often they feel real. But here's the thing. Your brain believes what you consistently tell it, especially when emotion is involved. So if you want a new identity, you must feed your mind new evidence, and evidence comes from action. Identity shifts happen when you do something that contradicts the old story, when you show up despite fear, when you follow through despite doubt, when you keep a promise to yourself you used to break. Those moments may feel small, but they are seismic internally. You don't need to become someone else. You need to reclaim parts of yourself that you buried under years of conditioning, strength, courage, discipline. Those qualities aren't missing. They're dormant. A new identity also requires letting go of the benefits of the old one, because every identity, even a limiting one, has payoffs. Maybe it protects you from disappointment. Maybe it gives you an excuse to avoid risk. Maybe it earns you sympathy. But if you keep the payoff, you keep the pattern. This is where honesty matters. Who would you have to stop being to become who you want to be? What stories would you have to release? What labels would you have to drop? Identity change isn't about pretending. It's about alignment. It's about acting in accordance with your highest values, not your loudest fears. And the more you act, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, what once felt forced becomes who you are. Your environment will test your new story. People may question it. Circumstances may challenge. Old habits may pull at you. That's not failure. That's reinforcement. Every time you hold the line, you strengthen the new identity. Remember this, you don't get a new life by thinking new thoughts once in a while. You get a new life by becoming a new person through consistent action. And the moment you change the story you live by, your future has no choice but to change with it. Decide who you are now and live from that place. Most people are waiting to feel ready before they act. They're waiting for motivation to strike, for confidence to appear, for the perfect emotional state to show up and carry them forward. And while they're waiting, their life stays exactly the same, because motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Discipline is what stays when motivation disappears. Motivation is an emotion. Discipline is a decision, and emotions fluctuate with sleep, stress, environment, and mood. Decisions create structure. That's why people who rely on motivation start strong and fade fast, while people who rely on discipline keep moving long after the excitement wears off. Here's the truth. Most people don't want to accept. You don't change your life on your best days. You change it on your ordinary days. On the days you're tired, on the days you're bored, on the days nothing feels exciting. That's when discipline matters. Discipline is not about being harsh with yourself. It's about honoring the future you more than the comfort of the present you. It's about choosing what you want most over what you want now. And every time you make that choice, you strengthen a muscle that most people never train. Daily action rewires your identity. You don't become disciplined by thinking disciplined thoughts. You become disciplined by doing disciplined actions over and over until they become who you are. Action shapes belief, not the other way around. People overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. That's why discipline focuses on consistency, not intensity. It's better to do something small every day than something massive once in a while. Small actions compound. They stack, they create momentum. Momentum is powerful because it changes how effort feels. What once felt heavy starts to feel normal. What once required willpower starts to feel automatic. And suddenly, you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're flowing. Most people quit because they expect progress to feel good immediately. But progress often feels boring before it feels rewarding. The brain wants novelty. Discipline trains the brain to respect repetition. And repetition is where mastery lives. There will be days when you don't feel like showing up. That's not a sign something's wrong. That's the moment discipline is supposed to take over. You don't need to win the day, you just need to show up. Showing up keeps the chain unbroken, and an unbroken chain builds pride. Discipline also creates freedom. That sounds backwards to most people. They think discipline is restriction. But the truth is, undisciplined living is the real prison. When you don't control your habits control you. When you don't control your time, distractions decide your future. Discipline gives you choices, it gives you energy, it gives you clarity, it reduces chaos, it simplifies life. Because when your non-negotiables are clear, you waste less time negotiating with yourself. And here's something most people overlook. Discipline builds self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when it's hard, you send a message to yourself, I can be trusted. That trust becomes confidence, not loud confidence, quiet, grounded confidence. You don't need to overhaul your entire life today. That's another trap. Discipline starts with one promise kept, one habit honored, one action completed, then you repeat it tomorrow and the day after that. And suddenly you're not the same person anymore. Life doesn't reward intention, it rewards execution. You can have the best goals, the clearest vision, the strongest desire, and none of it matters without action. Daily action is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become. Discipline also protects you from emotional decision-making. When you're disciplined, you don't ask, how do I feel today? You ask, what does this require of me? That question removes drama and creates direction. There will be setbacks, days you miss, moments you fall off. Discipline doesn't mean perfection. It means returning quickly without self-punishment. Consistency beats intensity. Progress beats perfection. If you want a different life, you don't wait for a different mood. You build different habits. And habits are built through disciplined repetition. The future you want is on the other side of daily actions you don't feel like taking yet. And the good news is, you don't have to feel ready to begin. Begin anyway. Show up anyway. Do the work anyway. Because discipline doesn't just change what you do. It changes who you are.